It looks as though I'm there. Hello everybody, it's Friday again, it's Paul Ducklin again, it's Naked Security Live again. As you can see, I'm not outdoors today. This is the first week that I have been inside. The reason being that it is incredibly windy out there. And the last time I tried to do a video in the wind, the mic noise was so bad that some people said they were basically unable to hear it. So I've retreated into seclusion indoors. You can see the trees waving in the background. The reason for today's video is something that came out during the week, some news that appeared. We wrote about it on Naked Security, and what I want to talk about, as the title says, is the latest trend in coronavirus scams. Now, we're all familiar with the fake news that's going around, and 5G networks can beam the virus at you, all this stuff that we're being bombarded with and we know to ignore. The problem is that some crooks have decided that subtlety, or if not subtlety, at least backing off and keeping it really simple, works very well. So we spoke last week about how DHL scammers, those package delivery scammers, rather than try and scare you witless by saying, hey, something's wrong with the delivery, you need to do this, or there's a problem with your bank account, you need to reaffirm your card. They're just saying, click here to track your parcel, as they do in real life, and hoping that you'll just follow suit, thinking that because it doesn't look outrageous, maybe it's believable. So in this case, this was a scam campaign that was spotted by Microsoft, and Microsoft mentioned this in a series of tweets because it just shows how crooks can adapt their style a little bit in a way of sort of catching you off guard. So this is an email, this particular one pretended to be from Johns Hopkins University, which is a very, very, very well-regarded medical institution in Maryland in the United States. And they do have a coronavirus research center, and they do publish genuine, believable, useful, informative statistics. So here comes an email saying, actually the giveaway here was they talked about horrible charts. Now a medical scientist wouldn't talk that way. Charts are neutral, they just carry the data, and then the interpretation would be in the email. But what you get in the email is, here's some information, some real statistics about coronavirus. If you open the attached spreadsheet, which you probably think you shouldn't because documents, spreadsheets, PowerPoint files, they have been long associated with malware attacks. But if you think, hey, it looks like a CSV file, it just looks like raw data, you open up the spreadsheet, what you get is a graph that, as far as we can tell, is genuine coronavirus stats in the United States. So you see infections ramping up and then settling down a little bit. And as far as we can see, the statistics are perfectly legitimate. So the crooks aren't trying to scam you here by selling you on something that doesn't exist, or saying, oh look, this is much, much worse than you might have thought. Another giveaway, by the way, at this point is the crooks have made a blunder, fortunately. Johns Hopkins has sent a spreadsheet, but the stats in there claim to come from the New York Times. Now, it's very unlikely that Johns Hopkins, who have their own stats, would publish somebody else's. But the data, it's just data. It kind of looks innocent and harmless. And that's the reason that crooks often choose document or spreadsheet files. What's the harm in data? Oh, Claire and Teresa, just saw your comments. Hi. Claire, I don't know where you're from, but Teresa, I know you're from Ottawa. So welcome. I guess it's the morning for you. So back to the scam. In this case, what you get is you open a spreadsheet. It looks like a realistic graph. It doesn't look like no one's trying to sell you face masks, no one's trying to scare you with medical stuff that sounds unbelievable. It's just some statistics that seem to be the real deal. Of course, as you can imagine, what crooks typically do is this spreadsheet, it isn't just a CSV file, it isn't just data, it isn't just a chart that produces a little graph for you. There's also a button that says enable macros. Now, if you're not familiar with that in Word, it kind of sounds innocent, doesn't it? Because macros, you know, there are things in Word where you can turn on macros, you can record some keystrokes and play them back later. They don't sound super, super harmless. Hi, Karen from Arizona. And Ian in Wales. Excellent. So we've got people from all over the world. So in this case, you're opening a document, it looks pretty innocent, it says enable macros, and the document's telling you to do that. Presumably the idea is you'll see more, or maybe you'll run something which will interpret the data or produce some additional information. Another trick the crooks use, by the way, to get you to click that enable macros button is they put in the document or the spreadsheet a slightly fuzzed out image, and they say this document's encrypted. To see it in all its glory, click enable macros to render the content properly. Now, as I said, macros sound completely innocent. They sound like something that just helps you automate button presses in documents or spreadsheets, and that's where the word comes from. Macros were just keystroke recorders in the early days. The problem is that in Microsoft Office, when you enable macros, what that term means is it means turn on a programming system called Visual Basic for applications that's built into Office that basically lets you embed in a document, a spreadsheet, or a PowerPoint file what is essentially a regular program. So anything that you would download that ends .exe, you'd know that's dangerous because that's a program. Anything you can do with a .exe file, you can do with a spreadsheet or a document or a PowerPoint file if the recipient clicks on Enable Macros, and that's what the crooks want you to do here. And if you do so, of course, then what's going to happen in the background is there'll be a download and some malware will appear and all sorts of bad stuff cuts loose. Now, of course, in this case, what happened is the malware was what's called a RAT, a remote access Trojan. So it was installing a program that would allow the crooks to sneak in later and do what they want with your computer. So they can turn on your webcam, they can take screenshots, they can monitor your keystrokes, they can riffle through your files and steal all your stuff. But of course, the problem with malware of this sort, where you've got a spreadsheet, you enable macros, you think it's innocent, nothing bad happens, but it downloads something off the internet, is the side effect of enabling macros can't be predicted in advance. So we can't write an article up front on Naked Security to say, oh, this one will lead to ransomware, and that one will lead to a keylogger. And the reason is that the crooks can actually change what they deliver by the time of day. They can change what they deliver by where you are, what sort of computer they think you've got, what country you come from, and so forth. They could even provide something completely innocent for a while until they know sufficiently many people have received their malevolent email, and so maybe security companies will go and have a look and go, actually that file looks pretty innocent, pretty harmless, and then at the last minute before you open the document they could switch over to do badness. Correct. Regarding macros, I used to teach courses in VBA macros and analyze the Melissa virus back. Now my phone, that's from Tormod, I just see ... I'm not going to click the see more. You're absolutely right. Macros, programming inside Word documents, has been around since that Melissa virus. That was last century. That sent out a whole load of emails, so it drew attention to itself enormously, because once you opened it, it started infecting other documents and it generated an email storm, so you were sending and receiving emails in your network en masse. These days, unfortunately, the crooks are much more subtle. And the power of the Visual Basic for Applications language has got much greater because it can reach right into the operating system. It can actually connect to other processes, fiddle with things in memory, do all the stuff that a regular malevolent program does. But these days, most malware that you get, it doesn't spread like a virus. It doesn't distribute itself. It just sits there waiting for its moment. So if you don't notice immediately, you could be in harm's way for some time. Stephen, hi Stephen, says, let me start. Laird Cummings, my last client deliberately enforced a system policy that locked out enabled macros. Good client. I agree. Now, the good hint that enabling macros is a bad idea is that even Microsoft thinks it's a bad idea because it's not enabled by default. Now, for internal documents and spreadsheets, ones that are used inside your company, your company may use macros for workflow purposes. For example, you might have an expenses spreadsheet, and that might have a button that you can press that will go and download and recalculate foreign exchange rates by getting the latest rates today. That's quite handy. Now, that's okay if it's circulated internally because presumably the company has checked out those macros and decided that they can be trusted. The problem is if you enable macros on a document that comes in from outside, basically you're receiving an email that's telling you essentially to infect yourself. And I have never seen a document or a spreadsheet arrive from outside any company with macros in it where the macros were harmless. When they come from outside, you can assume that the reason there's some program inside there that got through is that the crooks want to do something bad. So indeed, not only is it off by default, you could also force it off with group policy, for example, if you're a Windows administrator. Martin Janssen, hi from the Netherlands. Goedendag. And Jules Christina, if they're so bad, then why won't Microsoft do away with them altogether? That's an interesting question. Actually, if we go back to the 1990s, when word macro viruses, things like Melissa that spread wildly, when they were all the rage, there was a serious suggestion from the security industry to Microsoft, and this was before Microsoft got terribly serious about security like they are today, of course, saying, why don't you make macros an optional part of the Office install so you can leave the whole thing out? Now, Microsoft's response, I understand this, what they didn't want was to create two versions of Word, and it depended on what you picked how well they worked, so that some documents would open and some wouldn't. So they figured it's better to have everything installed and then turned off. And bless their hearts, they did eventually see the light, and macros are banned by default in documents, but unfortunately where companies use them, that option either gets allowed for some users or may get turned on for everybody. Laird saying again, properly vetted, they can be useful. Template formatting, for instance, exactly. In other words, the whole idea of having macros that you use with documents or spreadsheets or PowerPoint is it helps people create corporate standard documents easily. Your example of template formatting, the example I gave was you've got a spreadsheet, you want to have the latest exchange rates in it. It would be nice if it had a button that could run a program that was linked into the spreadsheet itself that went and got the latest exchange rates to get it all correct. The problem is that if it comes in from outside, you have no idea what's embedded in there. And basically, a document or a spreadsheet that has macros in, it isn't really just data anymore. It's data with a bunch of programming attached. And that programming, as I said, can do basically anything that an executable file had. So when you click that Enable Macros button, as innocent as it sounds, essentially what you are doing is blindly going to a website that the crooks told you about, choosing a download executable that they've told you to download, clicking download, clicking through the warning this could contain viruses. Do you want to run it? Yes, I do. 7 warnings later, yes, I want to run it. That's the equivalent of what you're doing when you click the Enable Macros button. Oh, art coats. I used to have a macro to micro adjust line spacing in Word. That was very handy. But yeah, the problem is that all the other ones that aren't the macros that you trust, or ones that you've already got or that come from outside, they're unlikely to doing micro line adjustments. They're likely to be doing macro scale adjustments to the security on your whole network, stealing data, keystrokes, screenshots. It's even possible to implement ransomware 100% in Visual Basic for applications, because a macro inside a document or a spreadsheet, it can find out the directories on the system, it can find out you've got a C drive, an E drive, an F drive, a G drive, etc. It can find out what network drives are attached, it can enumerate all the files, it can read them in, modify them and write them back. So ransomware can be self-contained. It usually isn't. The macro will usually go and download something, as I said, that the crooks decide later. But it's bad news. So here's the advice. And the reason this is really important now is we're seeing that obviously people are interested in knowing what's going on, getting used to the idea that it's important to get real statistics about the coronavirus pandemic. They know there are some places that can be trusted and some that can't. So the crooks are borrowing names, like in this case, Johns Hopkins University. You see a spreadsheet, the data looks legitimate. You think, oh, well, that's all right. It went up. That was pretty bad. And now it's tailing off. That's what I've heard. Great. Enable macros. Maybe that will give me more information. So what you need to do is when you receive a document or a spreadsheet from an unknown, unsolicited source, the best thing you can do, don't open the attachment at all, because it seems rather weird to open a file to see if you want to open it or not. On the other hand, it should be innocent enough to open a document if it's just data. So if you do open it, then 2 things to remember. Never enable macros, because you're authorizing an untrusted program to run and it could do absolutely anything it wants with your say-so. You won't get any more warnings. And the second thing to remember, when you've opened a document or a spreadsheet or even a PowerPoint or a PDF file, if there are links inside there that you're tempted to click on by the crooks, remember that you're not really clicking on a link that's in a document that you can trust. You're effectively blindly clicking on a link that's in the original email. That link might as well be in the email, and the crooks might as well be saying, hey, you've never heard of me, click my link. And the reason that they put links in documents, even in PDFs, where it seems unnecessary, you think, why on earth did the scammers not just put the link straight in the email? The reason is they want you to get you one step back, if you like, from actually thinking, oh, I'm clicking a link in an email, because everyone knows that's a bad idea. Somehow it feels more innocent when you're in a document and you're reading it, you're detached, you're now in Word, you're not in your browser or you're not in your email client. Stephen Brownlow, in conclusion, we all need Intercept-X, that's a Sophos product, question mark, should have put a smiley there. I'm not going to say that, but by the way, if you want to get Sophos technology and you would like to use it at home, Sophos Home is free for Windows and Mac. And of course, you go to any Naked Security article and at the bottom you'll see a free tools bar. I've got my hands mixed up here because I've got a mirror image on the phone. Basically, you can get free software for Windows, Mac, Linux, and Android and iOS. So if that's what you need or want, please go ahead. Sherry's asking, why do scammers send emails that say contains no content? I never open them, but what is the point? I get a lot of those, and as far as I can see, it's my Outlook webmail client saying that the email's empty. And I think the reason you get blank emails is, in most cases where I've investigated, it's because the crooks are using some kind of what you might call spamming engine or spam bot, where they've got 1,000 email addresses and a program that's churning out, sending a slightly varied version of the email to 1,000 different people. Something goes wrong with that software and it ends up sending out the emails but accidentally not including the text. The other thing you see is what we've seen is the exact opposite, where the crooks have got 30 or 40 different emails and they're supposed to pick one of them and send one randomly to each of, say, 1,000 different people. And what they end up doing is, these can be quite amusing, you get their entire spam corpus. So you get dear user and then one spam and then another one underneath because they've forgotten to divide them up. And instead of sending no spam to everybody, they send all the spams to everyone. Guy Go is saying, don't click on emails, please just don't. Actually, to be honest, Guy, if you can get away with that, that is fantastic advice, particularly if the email is saying, hey, here's something that's useful to you, like parcel tracking. Our recommendation is, even if it's the genuine parcel company, even if you really think it's DHL or the post office or whoever you think is delivering the stuff, and they just happen to get it right for you that day, even if it's a genuine email and there's a link in it, you don't need to click on the link in the email if you know you're expecting a parcel from the Royal Mail or DHL, do you? Because you should know from when you placed the order how to get to their site. You've probably already got a tracking number. It's much more convenient to click on the link in an email, but if you just take a step back and say, okay, if this notification is true, if it really did come from Royal Mail or DHL or whoever it is, then when I go to their website and put in the tracking number, I will get details off their website and I'm following a link that I chose and that I trust. And if you go there and you put in the tracking link and there is a parcel being delivered, good for you. You've got information that you need and can use. But if you go there and you get no such tracking, guess what? You just defeated the crooks. So those are the two bits of advice, well, the three bits of advice. Avoid opening attachments in emails, unsolicited emails at all, because you have no idea what they contain. If you do open the attachment, then never enable macros. It almost always ends in serious trouble, probably a malware infection, possibly ransomware. And thirdly, as Guy's saying, don't click on links in emails, but especially don't click on links in documents or spreadsheets or PowerPoints or PDFs under the impression that, oh, well, I'm one step away from the email, so therefore somehow it's magically safer. The crooks are relying on you making that assumption, feeling more comfortable because you're not in reading an email, you're actually one step away from it. Watch out, folks. So that's my advice for today, folks. Be particularly careful when coronavirus is involved, because even if there's no malware in that email, you could easily be facing fake information. You might as well bookmark some reputable sites for yourself and go there. So thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, stay secure. The finish button again.